The global economy is still feeling the effects of recession, which has led some people to look at alternatives such as Islamic banking. But how does this system work? And fundamentally, do we even need money to be happy in today's Western society? Join me for real stories, real issues and real views. This is Real Talk. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another edition of Real Talk. This is the program that looks at the hottest issues that affect youngsters living in today's modern society. You're joining us as we continue our UK roadshow, and here we're in the West London Academy for today's program. Now on today's show we're going to be having a look at finance, wealth, the pursuit of happiness and also Islamic banking. To help discuss this issue I'm joined by an expert panel in the studio which I'd just like to introduce for you now today. Starting from my right, firstly, I'm joined by Atif Mahmood Malik. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Real Talk. Atif's a credit fund manager for the Chenavari Hedge Fund. Secondly, I have the honour of introducing Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Yasab. Assalamu alaikum. It's a great honour to have you here on the programme. Iftikhar Saab was a former Amir of the UK Jamaat here in the UK and also has the honour of being awarded with an OBE. It's a great honour to have you in the programme. Assalamu alaikum. And finally, last but not least, I'm joined by Wasim Ahmed Khan. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Real Talk. Wasim Saab is an Islamic banking consultant and has had many years' experience with Islamic banking, so we'll be getting your points of view throughout the programme regarding Islamic banking. So that's our expert panel, and as usual, we have our audience here which will be adding in their points of view throughout the programme. But first of all, we want to hear what the general public think about this topic, so let's take a listen to the word on the street.
Someone Google the height restriction.
Money makes the world go round, or so the saying goes. Whether that's true or not, one thing has become clear in recent times. When money stops going around between the banks, the wheels of the current economic system come to a grinding halt. The financial collapse endured worldwide over the last few years has been on such a scale as to have been described as the greatest economic crisis in modern world history, all of which leads to beg the question, how did we get into such a mess? On the 10th of September 2008, Lehman Brothers, then the fourth largest investment bank in the USA, announced that it had made a loss of almost $4 billion in the last 3 months alone. Within a week of making this announcement, Lehman Brothers collapsed into bankruptcy and helped spark the chain of financial panic known as the credit crunch. One of the fallouts of the recession was the result that the UK government spent far more money than it actually had, with national debt forecast to soar to over £1 trillion this year. Last year alone, we spent approximately £40 billion servicing interest on our debts. Quite clearly, the capitalist economic model being used today has badly failed. But is there any real alternative? Well, today we're going to be taking a look at a completely different economic model. In fact, we're going to be turning the clock back to a system first used 1400 years ago. We're going to be asking the question, can the Islamic economic model be used today to help us drive forwards? And does it provide a solution to the problems the economy is facing today? What do you make of the current banking situation in the UK? How has the credit crunch affected the country, affected morale and affected businesses?
Well, generally I find that a lot of businesses can't get support. Small businesses basically can't get support from the banks, so they're finding it hard to get money.
Yeah, it's definitely had a knock-on effect. Lots of redundancies, lots of people kind of having problems, yeah.
Well, I run a business at the moment and it has affected me quite considerably. It is a difficult market out there at the moment. It's difficult for people to find jobs. It's a very challenging time for everyone.
Do you think, perhaps the system needs a revamp, or are we okay as we are?
I don't think we're okay as we are.
Definitely not happy. I don't think many people are, so I definitely think it needs a change.
I think the banks need regulating more than what they have been at the moment.
If I'm completely honest with you, it hasn't hit me at all. I'm still living my life. I'm enjoying what's going on at the moment, yeah, to be honest.
And have you taken out any loans and mortgages, and have you found that's kind of been affected by the whole situation, or not really?
No, not really, no. I actually just applied for a credit card. It was all fine, got that through, happy days.
Islamic finance, essentially it proposes that it strictly imposes a law of no interest. Yeah, Sharia law essentially. So there's no interest involved. It's based on shared investments with shared profits. So some people are suggesting it might be a system we could use in the UK, for example, because it's whole issue of borrowing and lending has arguably caused a credit crunch. So it's something some people are talking about. Is it right? Is it wrong? We don't know. Any thoughts on it?
I think that certain people would have a stigma attached to it simply because of the name. But I think from how you put it there, it sounds quite good actually. I'd like to see it.
It does sound good. Again, it is competition, so also which is a good idea. So I don't really have a problem with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's worth a try. I mean, anything is now, like with the way things are going. So definitely.
Oh, definitely. It interests me a lot anyway. It might be a change to all the problems of this credit crunch, maybe.
In an ideal world, you know, if we lived in a utopia, then everybody would be helping everybody else without, you know, asking for interest if you don't need it.
That was the word on the street, and I hope that was beneficial for our viewers to get them thinking about the general topics regarding this issue. It seems like if I could turn to you first, we're looking at the role of money, and we're looking at materialism and also the Islamic viewpoint on these matters. But just generally, I mean, within society, could we actually live without money? It seems that people seem to accustom so many of society's ills on money and the pursuit of money. And do you think society could actually live without money?
I think if you look at the way the global economic system has evolved and developed over the years, money is important as a measure, as a medium of exchange. That are basically the two and crucial factors that derive money. But whether money is, at the end of the day, be it in all of happiness, absolutely not. Happiness, as we Muslims believe, comes from taqwa, from contentment. And money is not the sole provider of contentment. As a matter of fact, there's an old phrase in the English language you say that easy lies the head that wears the crown. So essentially, money is not in itself happiness, but money can, depending upon the contentment, help towards that end.
Okay, I mean, just looking at it from a historical perspective, where did this sort of, reliance on money come from, and the sort of, materialistic aspects of society? Where did that actually originate from?
If you look back, I mean, you have to define what money is essentially. I mean, when we look at money now, money means currencies and coins, which is again is a measure or it's a medium of exchange. But the fact that money was introduced many, many years ago, and when I say many years ago, you can go back as far as to the annals of history and see money was always there in one shape or form. So fiat money was introduced long before Islam, and it was in the form of in the Indian subcontinent, there were emperors that used it on pieces of leather, or after Islam, in the Abbasid period, there were actual coins that have been in it and that are in the museums here in this country. So money has been around for a very long time. It depends how we have defined money and what it has been used for. Those are the critical determinants of what money has to do with.
Arthur, just turning to you, I mean, one thing that we touched on just there is that a lot of people feel that you have to have money to be happy. And what would your views be on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say excessive money breeds, materialism and distance from God. Insufficient money leads to, your inability to survive in society and ultimately poverty. So really, I would say what we need, our objective should be moderation. What does that mean? How do I define moderation? I would say, particularly in this program, that pursuit of money is when it's in line with pursuit of happiness. When those two are not in sync, then we either have poverty or we have excessive materialism. But so long as, and definition, of course, of pursuit of happiness has to be in line with Islamic principles. So long as we fall within the guidelines of how to live our life with the fear of God, then the pursuit of money in that objective, I think, is fine.
Okay. I want to bring in the audience at this sort of basic level of the discussion. A lot of you are working here in this country, and obviously you're earning money. At the same time, we live in what is a capitalist society. It's a very materialistic society, some would say as well. Just generally, what are your views about money and about happiness from money? People seem to say that, to be successful, you have to have money, and to be happy even, you have to have money in certain material possessions. And what would be your points of view? I'm just going to take a seat here. What do you think about this?
Hi, it's a very long-standing question that was asked for generations before us, and the general answer was no, you can be happy without money. But we need to remember in those times, post-World War, there was a general state of development, growth, wealth accumulation, and so the general, I think I agree with the panel in where they say moderation should be applied. The average person in the past was content and had more than moderate wealth. We're now living in a world where we have experienced a credit crisis, where we're having significant inflation. There isn't much employment, house prices are significantly high, and I'd say that the general average person is not content, and we're finding it struggling to survive and to be happy. So at this moment in time, I would say that happiness is very much aligned with money, because money is needed to gain food, to gain a house, and to derive those things. Only then can we have happiness at this moment in time.
So you're talking about sort of basic necessities as well?
Yeah, so
yeah, that's a good point. Turning back to the panel, there's a very fine balance between having enough money for your basic necessities, you know, shelter, food and things like this, and then having an excess. How do we know when we're going into an excess of money? Atif, if I could turn to you for that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I would turn back to Dr. Yaz's point, which I think he actually nailed it. I'm not sure if we all really caught it there, but what he was saying was the definition of pursuit of happiness is that, because what we always think is the inverse is true, unhappiness and happiness is just the inverse. It's not. Actually, I think what we're discussing here is that pursuing money so that we don't incur unhappiness, i.e. we are able to satisfy our basic essentials, is the way we should look at it. So money should purely be looked at. We don't want to be unhappy. We want to be able to pay our rent. We want to be able to feed our family. But in the pursuit of happiness, it should not be aligned, actually, to be honest, with money at all. The pursuit of happiness should be aligned with our relationship with God.
Right, okay. I mean, Yasab, just turning to you, you've had a lot of experience of working in a number of countries around the world. Just looking at it from a global perspective, is this just an issue that we face in this country, or is it in every country?
I think the global economic climate and recession and its effects on people, it's the same story everywhere, all over the world. But the thing is that in our mind, we should not pursue money. We should pursue the real objects of life. If we are looking for contentment, if we are looking for happiness, we are looking for comfort, we are looking for meeting our basic needs in life, then we should pursue those things. And we need a system in order to satisfy all those things. It is not just the money. There is no shortage of money in the world. At the moment, even now, there is so much of money, but in spite of that, we have millions and millions of people who are starving. So if money was able to provide for the needs of humanity, then obviously there would be no poverty crisis, there would be no crisis of people dying of starvation. But money cannot fulfill those needs because the system itself is faulty. So Islam provides a system of distribution of wealth which basically focuses on meeting the needs of people.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. We're going to touch on Islamic banking later on in the programme. Let me get some more points of view from over here in the audience as well. Looking at the general aspects of materialism, and money's not just something for necessities, but it also gives social status as well. I want to get some of your points of view on that. Let's see if I could just start with you. People look, especially in this country, at the clothes you wear, the car you drive, your worldly possessions, and they judge you on that. So how isn't that a negative effect? And if that is, and how can we sort of get around that?
Yeah, very much so. I think one of the points that I was kind of looking to draw out as well from the conversations that have been had by the panel and the audience already was that a lot of the issues I feel that we see in unhappiness of people who even are wealthy and such, like it's very much self-inflicted in a way, to an extent, because you're brought up in society, so fair enough, there's influences that are upon you, and you kind of have to you find yourself developing along those lines, and you want to be able to have the nice cars and things like that, and that means then you have pressures upon you of money. So that pressure of money is what then means that you're living in a certain way. And I think if you look at, for the example that was given by the panel, whereby, you know, there's a lot of wealthy people that are still unhappy, but then on the same flip side, you know, there's a lot of unwealthy people that are very happy. If you look at, you know, picture scenes that we've seen through, you know, very charity websites like Humanity First, that, you know, the poor in Africa, that they're very happy when they just see very basic things to us.
That's right.
But they're still very happy with that, and it's because they haven't had to have that influence of all the, you know, the sort of materialistic things that we do and we face, and I think that's a big factor to take into account.
All right, let's get some more points. Just turning to my left, Farouk, I mean, we talked about there that, you know, some people just need a basic amount to stay happy. So who's telling us that we need more and more money to be happy, and where do these issues and where do these pressures come from?
I think that's related to the kind of consumer society that we live in. We're kind of inundated with, you know, advertising telling us, you know, the pursuit of material possessions. This kind of the attitude of keeping up with the Joneses. You always want to be better than your neighbours. But I think the point which was touched earlier about contentment, you're never going to get that contentment through these material possessions. And I think part of that contentment is realising, you know, the blessings that you do have already, even if it's a small amount of money that you have. We talked about poor people in Africa, even with, you know, a small amount of food.
Right.
If you reflect on what Allah has given you, rather than endlessly pursuing, you know, additional material gains, I think that's a far quicker route to contentment.
Okay. I just want to bring Wasim Saab into this discussion, working within the financial industry and the pressures on you to work in that. And what would be your points of view? What's been your experience?
I think essentially, since we are living in a conventional system where the system has evolved over the years to bring in this kind of competition, where everyone is looking to make money for themselves at the expense of the society. One thing we tend to forget, that at the end of the day, all these possessions, be they houses or cars or everything else, it ultimately belongs to Allah. And Allah has given us that in this world to not only use it for ourselves, but use it to the betterment of the society at large. So part of the global economic system or financial system would be not simply me being the person earning those exorbitant returns, but rather I am encouraged to use these real resources to generate returns not only for myself, but for the society at large. And I think that we're looking at something that has been advocated always, which is justice, economic justice, social justice, and legal justice.
Okay. Yasser, just bringing you into this discussion. I mean, we're talking about business and Islam as if they're almost sort of, you know, mutually exclusive. But, you know, going back to the Holy Prophet ﷺ's time, you know, business was apparent there. You know, can you give us some examples of what kind of business was happening at that time?
Well, obviously, this is common knowledge that we are living at a time and in a society which is not complying with the Islamic values.
Right.
We know all of that. But we know what Islamic values are in business, in trade, and these Islamic values go back to the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He himself was a very successful trader. And as we all know, he was very, very successful. But his principle was that in trade and dealing and business, absolute integrity and morality should be observed. And he was very particular that nothing comes into the market which is contrary to the samples which have been shown to the other party.
Right, okay.
And actually, sometimes he went to the markets and there were heaps of corn, etc. And he would put a stick, you know, in the heap, just to make sure that what is on the top is also right there underneath. So honesty and integrity and the passion to benefit others, the care of others, that is really very important. I mean, there is nothing wrong with anyone to have 2 cars or 2 houses, but what is important is not to forget the needy lot around us, within our family and within the community as well. If their needs are fulfilled, then whatever Allah has given to us is Allah's favor. And that Allah very clearly says that Allah favors some more than others. So some have more favors of Allah than others. Some have 2 cars, others may have no car at all. But that is all the favor of Allah, and we have to look up to Him to provide us whatever we need in this life.
It seems like it's an interesting point because some people, they're so scared of being materialistic that they take it to an extreme. Where they say, actually, do you know what, my car is falling apart, but I won't get a new one because of, you know, X, Y, Z reason, because it'll be too materialistic and I don't want to be seen with a new car. And do you think there's actually a danger of taking it too far? Whereas actually from what we've heard from Yasab, Islam, you know, doesn't say to get rid of business and trade completely, but maybe just encourages it within certain limits.
I think if you look at Islam, Islam preaches moderation. And moderation basically means that you should not only be living with your means, but you should also be moderate in a sense that you don't have to go either to the extreme right or the extreme left. So if you have the means to provide for the basic necessities for yourself and your family, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says very clearly in the Holy Quran that we will provide you for ease for yourself and your families, so you need to take care of them in a sense, then I think that it's important that people should pursue that moderation. So going to or considering or perceiving that anything is going to be extremely left or right, I think should not be the issue.
Yasser, how would you respond to that?
Well, I would say that Islam encourages giving loans. One of the obligations to a neighbor, which was described by the Holy Prophet ﷺ, was that if your neighbor needs a loan, give him a loan. But Islam says that a person who asks for a loan is a person in need. He is stressed, he has some problem, that is why he is asking for a loan. So don't exploit that person. Help him out of your spirit of beneficence. And then the rights of the debtor are very considerable in Islam. Islam says if the debtor is in trouble, he cannot pay you when he promised to pay, give him time. Give him time. And then God Almighty says that it is better for you to write off that debt rather than, you know, pursuing that person who cannot pay the debt. So the Islamic society is a society of sharing, helping each other with a good heart, helping the other one, not that I can take advantage of the other one's problem or stress, but helping the other one out of, you know, my fraternity, kindness, and goodness for the other people.
Okay, Basim Saab, if I could just turn to you. I mean, we've talked about an ideal society, but the society we're living in at the moment, what are the options?
I think you look at an alternative mode of financing rather than borrowing money. And the alternative mode of financing is risk sharing, really profit and loss, risk sharing, what the banks, Islamic banks actually do and perceive. So essentially, in the case of, for example, a mortgage, rather than a mortgage, a bank buys a house for you and tells you exactly that they will charge a profit on it because they are in business, so they have to earn a profit. And you agree with them, and you live in that house, and you make monthly payment, just like you do for a mortgage. But the way the monthly payment will work is that you pay off the profit, and part of that will be the profit that goes to the bank, and part of that will be what you call as paying off as a principal on the house. So in essence, the bank that is the owner of that house from day one starts to see its share diminishing. And you're, as the tenant in that house or the person who will eventually own the house, your share increasing. This is called diminishing musharaka. Musharaka in Arabic means partnership. So you're working together as partners, where the bank's partnership or the value tends to decrease over time, your value of the house tends to increase over
that's
time.
interesting. And there's a lot of people here in the audience who are within the financial sector, and I want to get some of your points of view on this. So, I mean, we're talking about sort of alternatives to borrowing and things like that. So if I could just get a show of hands firstly, how many of you work in the financial sector here? If I can just... yeah, okay, can I just get some points of view from you in terms of these alternative modes of borrowing and spending, just in general?
So I think the difficulty comes basically in this society. So if we were in a society where it was just Islamic banking, it's very simple, right? That there's no issue there. The problem is in this society, it's mixed. You know, even these banks that are doing the Islamic mortgages, they're also involved in the non-Islamic mortgages.
That's right, yeah.
And I mean, I'm not no expert on Islamic finance. From what I've seen, that even the kind of your monthly payments in this case for the mortgages are actually at the back end based on the current interest rates, for example, in the system. So I think for an ordinary person to really understand, you know, how this is done is very difficult. So for them, they can almost make the decision that, well, actually, you know, I don't really understand what's going on here. What I'm hearing everywhere on the street is that actually this is not even really Islamic.
Right, right.
So for them, you know, they take maybe the easy choice, or maybe the choice they think is right is, well, you know what, I'm in a society, I don't really have a choice. I need to have a house, I need to provide for my family, so I'm going to buy a house and mortgage. I think.
Okay, I want to get some more points of view as well. So if I could just get your points of view as well, talking about financial models and alternative models. Are there any alternatives, and you know, how successful do you think they would be?
Well, in terms, I mean, I've been looking at Sharia compliant products in the past as well, and I think it's quite a difficult avenue to take. Firstly, it's the expense ratio. I think it's always a bit heavier on the Sharia side. And it doesn't really make it, especially for someone like myself, and I would say a majority of people, taking the cheaper alternatives, and you know, it becomes a cost exercise for us all. We end up taking the cheaper alternative because we know that we can pay it off sooner, you know, etc., etc. But I mean, you know, even going down the Sharia side, I mean, I do understand the necessity for it. I do understand the need for it. It's just from time to time it does seem a little bit more expensive.
Right. We just want to wrap up this half of the program. So, Yasab, if there are any final...
Well, there is this system of credit cooperatives, which has been quite successful. There is the Grameen banking system in Bangladesh, which started off in the 70s and has been very successful. And it works without any interest.
Right.
And we have this traditional system within the community as well, where we have credit cooperatives. You know, people pay a certain sum of money every month. Say there are 20 people, everyone pays £500 every month, and you have a lump sum of 10,000, which is given to one person this month, and he utilizes this for whatever purpose he wants to utilize. There is no interest, nothing of the sort. He just continues to pay £500. So this is a practical, successful alternative to the banking system, and this is something which could be considered and put into practice. But at the same time, we know within our own Jamaat, this question has been raised with our Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahimullah and the present Khalifa as well. What can we do? We have to pay interest.
That's right. Yeah.
So in circumstances, in the systems in which we have to survive, where we have to pay interest and there is no way out, we are allowed to pay interest. But obviously we are not allowed to charge any interest on any of our investments. If we are paid interest, that has to be spent for the publication and the publicity of Islam, etc. So we have those provisions until a time when the Islamic system will be established.
Right, okay. Jazakallah. I mean, I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and we just want to wrap up this half of the program, but we're going to carry on this discussion in the second half as well. So to the viewers, make sure you stay with us, and in the second half we're going to be looking at Islamic banking. You know, what are the history of interest? Where did interest come from? What's the effect of interest as well? And what can we do as members of this society? What are some of the alternatives? So stay with us for part two just after this short break.
The Review of Religions is one of the longest-running religious magazines. In print since 1902, it continues to play an important role in presenting the noble teachings of Islam, reflecting its rational, harmonious and inspiring nature. It features articles and viewpoints on different religions, making religion and religious philosophy accessible to a wider readership. The Review of Religions was founded by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be upon him, who claimed on the basis of divine revelation that he was the promised Messiah and Mahdi, whose advent had been foretold by the Holy Prophet of Islam, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and by the scriptures of other faiths. The annual subscription of this unique and enlightening magazine is just £15 per year or $30 US. To receive your copy of the Review of Religions, visit our website at www.reviewofreligions.org, where you can browse past issues and subscribe online, or contact us by email to info@reviewofreligions.org. The Review of Religions, a unique magazine of religious thought.
An interlingual channel promoting interfaith dialogue, worldwide, live and interactive, on satellite television and the internet. This is MTA International.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to part 2 of today's Real Talk, where we're looking at the Islamic perspective on money and economics. Now, in the second half of the program, we're going to be looking at the Islamic economic system. But first of all, we're going to take a listen to the word on the street.
One sector of the global economy that has grown steadily over the last few decades is Islamic banking. In 1985, the Islamic banking industry was worth £5 billion. Today, that figure is closer to somewhat 300 billion. Islamic finance now accounts for 1% of the global market and boasts over 350 banking institutions. But it's not just Muslims who are now turning to the Islamic economic model. Many Western banks are seeing the possible advantages of having a separate Islamic branch, with half of all clients who use Islamic financial products reported to be non-Muslims. So what exactly are the differences between today's capitalist model and the Islamic banking system? Perhaps the biggest contrast between the two models is the fact that Islam strictly prohibits the giving or taking of interest. Instead, it places emphasis on shared investments with shared profits. Importantly, Islam also imposes zakat, a tax on savings which go unused over the period of 1 year. As we can see, there are a number of big differences between the current financial system and Islamic economics. But the questions we have to ask ourselves are, is our money better off in an Islamic bank? And looking at the bigger picture, can Islamic economics provide a solution to the problems our economy faces today? To find out the answers to these questions, I've come here today to the Islamic Bank of Britain. IBB was first opened for business in 2004. I'm here to talk to Momin Mahmood, who's been a senior manager at the bank for over 4 years. Assalamu alaikum, Momin. Thank you for joining us here today for this interview, and thank you for taking the time out. The first question I'd like to ask you is that Islamic banking is now being looked at as an alternative option to the modern capitalist system. But I mean, what can Islamic banking offer here in the UK?
Okay, I mean, Islamic banking values itself on being a socially responsible investing mechanism. So in saying that, what I mean is it bases itself on ethical and equitable principles which are derived from Islamic law, i.e. Sharia. So our products and services exclude any involvement with interest. They exclude any, and they're underpinned by business activity, and these are excluding activities that would compromise our position in terms of Sharia.
In most banks in the UK today, obviously when opening a savings account, the account holders receive a steady amount of interest payments to encourage them to save. Obviously the taking of interest is prohibited in Islam, and so therefore what alternative sorts of saving opportunities do IBB offer? And why should we open an Islamic savings account?
Well, within Islamic banking, there is a different number of modes of finance, how we can operate whilst remaining true to our faith. So some of the common principles we use are mudarba and wakala. Now these are two principles whereby the bank and a customer work together towards a common goal, i.e. making a profit from trading. So Islam actually promotes trade but forbids usury. Okay, so what we effectively do is we work together in different capacities depending on the Islamic financial principle you use to actually use the capital provided by the customer with the bank providing the expertise, and in making the Sharia compliant investments and then sharing the profit with the customer on a pre-agreed ratio.
What we are doing now in Islamic finance today is trying to implement those techniques to modern circumstances, and that is taking time, right? And where people find difficulty is that when you're actually trying to develop those techniques, use the Islamic jurisprudence, the laws that have been developed over these last 14 years to modern times, it is taking time, right? And therefore we don't have the techniques now, or we don't have the products, or we don't have the tools right now to control, right, or to regulate the Islamic industry like you have for the conventional, right? And where governments tend to find difficulty is that, okay, if they do allow Islamic finance to, the whole country, they just say that we will not have any banks other than Islamic banks in this country. The question is how to regulate them, and we don't really have the tools. It is at the time it will take time to develop those tools, and as those tools are developed, Islamic finance will take more and more of the total economy.
That was the word on the street, and I hope that was of interest to our viewers at home. Wasim Saab, if I could just turn to you firstly. We're looking at the Islamic economic system, but what is it? Can you just explain to us what it is and how it differs from other economic systems?
Sure. If you look at the Islamic economic system, most people tend to associate the Islamic economic system with the prohibition of interest only. Interest is one important aspect, or the prohibition of interest is one important aspect in the Islamic economic system, but there are several others. And the most important one is basically justice. So we're talking about legal justice, we're talking about economic justice, we're talking about social justice. Trust is a very important pillar of the Islamic economic system. Contracts and the sanctity of contracts and the obligations and rights, the property laws, property rights. Dr. mentioned early on about the forgiveness of loans, which is called Qard al-Hasan. This is very important. Zakat is very important. So the Islamic economic system is actually much more than simply the prohibition of interest. It's essentially a very wholesome concept. The practicality of this is that we are trying to make the Islamic economic or financial system function in a conventional system. That's like trying to put through a square peg in a hole. And that's why it's really not working very well, even though that we have made significant progress over the last 40 years in Islamic banking. We are having some difficulties on that. The second element of this is that if you look at the Islamic economic system, in the Islamic economic system, there's a religious underpinning that you do not have in the conventional system. So therefore, people not only have to understand Islam and Sharia law, but they have to believe in it to make the system function. In terms of the differences between the conventional system and the Islamic economic system, you have several differences. One, of course, is a prohibition of interest. But then again, there is the question of, for example, those of you in the audience and the viewers that may understand, it's an issue of the mismatch of assets and liabilities within the conventional system and the Islamic economic system. For example, in the case of conventional system, your outgoings and your liabilities are fixed, your returns, your assets are variable. So there's a mismatch between the two. Whereas in the case of an Islamic economic system, what your outgoing is, i.e. your liabilities, is very much directly related to the income on your assets. So in essence, absolutely, it's much more balanced. So you can only pay someone out if you earn something on that. And therefore, it does not, it reduces significantly the chance of that mismanagement.
Intricate details in there, we'll discuss that throughout the program. Yasab, if I could just turn to you, where did these principles of Islamic banking come from? Is it something that we find just from the hadith, or is it within the Quran as well? Where do we get these the principles which govern Islamic banking as a whole?
I think the fundamental principle is that the absolute owner of everything is God himself. This is the principle. So everything that we have in this universe belongs to Allah. And I think, as I said very briefly earlier on, Allah has made us His viceregents on this earth and has provided us everything in the universe so that we make the best use of all this for fulfilling our own needs and for the benefit of others. So basically, Allah says that don't think that everything that you have belongs to you. It does not belong to you. It belongs to Allah. You are a trustee. You have been entrusted with a responsibility to make the best use of this in accordance with the values and the moral principles that I have given you, and you adhere to those in your life and in your workings so that you can achieve the best out of all this in your lives. So this is the base of the Islamic economic system. And then, of course, through Sharia laws and through the practices, Islam provides a very comprehensive distribution system of the economic gains and the generation of economy.
Right, okay. Let's turn to the audience as well, specifically looking at this point of interest as well. I just want to analyse this as well. What is the role of interest as well? And Nasir, have you got a point?
I thought that some really interesting points came out from the panel there, and one of the thoughts I had was that, in terms of the question of can we have an interestless or Islamic banking sort of perspective in our society here, and what I was wondering was, it would be nice from a British-born Muslim to have that kind of implementation and not have to worry about the interest that we do have in place. And I kind of wondered if maybe Wasim Saab or someone could explain the origins of interest itself and where it came about.
Yes, that's a good question. Yeah, Wasim Saab, you could just shed some light on that.
If you look at interest, if you go back to the annals of history, interest has always been there. People have called it by different names. It's basically an excess that has been earned. If you look back at the start of civilization in some sense, Aristotle made a statement very clearly which said, before all the religions were in place, he made a statement which said basically that any excess that you get without earning it is a very negative thing for the society. But as far as interest is concerned, if you look in the Torah, if you look in the Bible, right, which came before the Quran, interest is very clearly prohibited.
Right.
Okay?
So it's not just unique to Islamic banking?
It's not unique to Islamic banking at all. So I have quotations that I can share with you at some point from the Torah, from the Bible, and of course from the Quran, absolutely, that that interest has been totally prohibited.
Yasab, just turning to you, I want to move the discussion forward a bit more. I understand that Islam has certain principles about the accumulation of wealth, and if you could just shed some light on that.
One point is that in Islam, the risk, as we have just heard, is a very obvious element. You cannot really progress in economic deals without taking risk. But Islam says that in other systems, the system that we have today, people take risk with fear.
Right.
But in Islam, you take risk with a pride and joy because you know that risk is going to benefit the other person. Even if you lose a little bit, it does not matter because you are helping someone else to be on his feet and progress economically, financially. So this is one point. The other point to understand is that all Islamic systems are collective systems. They do not focus on an individual. They focus on a society, on a community. So as such, the Islamic economic system, every principle and every rule it has is for the benefit of the entire community, the entire society. And that is why Islam has a very fair system of distribution. For example, in economic ventures, there are three partners: the worker, the source supplier, the financier, and then the community. So the third partner, which is not directly involved in your enterprise, is the community, and the community has to receive the benefit of whatever you generate out of your enterprise. So basically, Islam says that every person, every individual, every entity of that system should receive the benefit proportionately. The worker should receive his benefit proportionately, the financier should receive his benefit, and the community. And for the benefit of the community, Islam has enforced zakat. And zakat is not only a levy, a tax. The word zakat means to purify something, to foster something. So zakat is basically to purify what you earn and to foster the community. So it has a very important role in the economic system of Islam. And Islam says that, of course, this levy is essential because for the institutions to meet the needs of the community, you have to have a funding which comes through zakah. But then Islam emphasizes the voluntary contribution to the welfare of the society. So the voluntary contribution and the zakah should be able to meet the needs of the community. Remember that in Islam, there is no concept of poverty. Islam talks about the needy people meeting the needs of people. It doesn't talk about poverty and the poor, because under the economic system of Islam, there should absolutely be no poor and no poverty. And Islam makes sure that out of whatever you do through your economic enterprises, you take good care of the community and their needs so that everyone has a comfortable survival and they are not short of anything.
Okay, Jazakallah. Yes,
just to add something to what Dr. Yasab said. Islam abhors hoarding, be it hoarding of commodities, be it hoarding of money. Money is considered to be the lifeblood of the economy. Islam discourages idle balances. So in other words, money should be always invested, spent profitably, again, for the people involved and for the society at large as it is. That is why the whole concept of getting interest on something and that also fixed sum on something where I'm not taking a risk, I'm getting. Because see, the concept of earning in Islam is basically profit and risk sharing. It's not earning a return without sharing the risk. So if I have money deposited at a bank and the bank says they will give you back 5% per year on this deposit, I don't care what happens to the bank. Whether the bank earns money, earns a return on that money or not, the bank still have to give me 5%. That's what Islam says is not allowed. If the bank makes money, I make money. If the bank doesn't make money, I don't make any.
Right. Okay. Taking it back one step, Yasab talked about the institution of zakat.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about the specifics? What is zakat? What is it put on, and how much should we pay in, and where should that money be used?
Zakat is always used on or levied on idle balances. That's why, again, it's a discouragement for idle balances. So money that's in circulation is not subject to zakat. And I think that the levy is 2.5%, Dr. Saab, on idle balances. So that's why gold that's not used, it's not in use, that ladies have, for example, they have to pay zakat on that. Any money that's been kept on deposit and not being used. Now, you can always argue that I've kept this money for a particular need. I need to send my child to university, I need to get someone married, whatever the situation may be, I need to keep some money aside for medical emergency, stuff like that. That's fine, as long as there's a particular motive for that. But if it's just lying there because I'm too scared to invest that somewhere as a risk capital, then I think you need to pay zakat on that.
Sorry, you want to have his contributions? Yeah.
On what Wasim Khan Sahab was just mentioning, you mentioned it, that the hoarding of wealth is forbidden. But certainly, as Dr. Sahab had mentioned, that is one of the reasons why we pay zakat, to prevent that from happening. But surely we don't live in a pure Islamic world at this moment. We are paying interest on our mortgages, so surely we should be allowed that the little bit of savings that we do have, perhaps saving for a bad day, bad weather, we should be allowed to gain interest on that, and that could be netted off against mortgage. And certainly we are paying zakat, so that is preventing the hoarding of cash. That's why I just don't understand. And in the past, the unit of measure was regarded on gold, which is constant. Now our wealth is based on inflationary, so the value of money today is worth less in the future because of inflation. So to keep the same level of value of money, we need to gain interest, so that if inflation is going up 4%, £100 today is worth 104 tomorrow. If I don't get interest, I'm losing money. So should we not be allowed to gain interest on our savings?
Interesting question. Yeah,
let me answer that. Islam does not allow any compensation for inflation or loss of purchasing power in idle balances. It does not allow for that. What Islam allows for is that you can bring that compensation in terms of your trade. So you can increase the prices of what you're buying and selling in your trade or in your projects, because that's it. No, the main idea behind all of this is the following. It's basically essentially that there has to be an underlying economic activity associated with the money that you have. If you don't have that economic activity associated with it, that the money is just lying there and the money is losing purchasing power, you should not be compensated for that. That's another way of discouraging idle balances. But when you have invested in it, and the pricing that you will do in that investment should compensate you for the loss of purchasing power in the future.
Okay. One question I wanted to pose to the whole panel, actually, when we were researching this program, we asked a lot of people about Islamic banking and stuff, and we're talking about zakat right now. In this country, you know, I'm already paying tax, and that tax is going to benefit systems in the same way that zakat is. So why do I need to pay the tax and yet still pay zakat on top of that as well? Shouldn't that tax that I'm paying, you know, to the government here be sufficient in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, for the country here, that should be fine. But you're looking at the general ummah, the Muslim ummah in the world, and other people who may not even belong to the Muslim ummah but may be needy. Right. So that's why humanity for that we have, the charity or other charities that are there, that take that part of the zakat and distribute it to people that are not beneficiaries of the system in this country, but that are living in other countries, such as, for example, parts of Asia and Africa.
Okay. We're coming to the conclusion of the program. I see there's some hands up, so I want to make sure everyone has a chance to put forward their points of view. What would you like to?
My question is to the panel. In the last few years, we've seen countries such as Greece, Portugal and Ireland go into financial crisis. In theory, if those countries had an Islamic financial model in place, do you think those countries would have had that crisis?
Okay, yeah, just briefly, if you could just touch on it.
I would say they may have had it, but the chance of that would have been very low.
Okay, to the audience now, this is your chance to put in your final points of view as well. I see some hands up. Are there any final questions or clarifications, and how do you want to end this discussion? Yeah.
Yeah, I just I thought some of the viewers at home might be interested in this point, that is it halal or haram to invest in stocks and shares? What's the Islamic point of view on that?
Yeah, that's a nice question. We'll have the panel respond to that.
No, it's not haram to invest in shares as long as the company that you're investing in is not involved in haram activity. And also at the same time that company adheres to, in terms of its debt to equity ratios and several other aspects of it that I don't want to go into the details at this stage, conforms to what the Sharia compliant or the Sharia boards have basically authorized you to be. Because in this day and age, you're never going to find any business that does not have any kind of debt. So you have to be practical about it. But then you say you can invest in a company that has a very low debt element. And any earnings that come in from the debt area in that company should be given away to charity to purify the income coming in from that.
Okay, all right, Jazakallah. I want to give the panel a last chance to have, just a wrap-up point, and Atif, if I could start with you. The whole discussion we've had today about not only Islamic banking but materialism in general, what would be your final comments for today?
Yeah, Caleb, I mean, I think actually you're right. For me, the two are one point, because it comes back to, and somebody mentioned it, the niyat of the individual. So if we take the examples, and today we've got Japan being a highly capitalist society that's quite successful, and then you've got China that people regard obviously as a very successful economy, and it's a highly communist society. Right. Do we say it's the system that's the success, or is it the people? And you must look at you know, the people of both these nations. And Chinese people have very high morals, very high values, and in fact for them it's the face value that counts so much, that the Chinese communist regime uses that as a tool to enforce their society. Similarly, if we look at Japan, the Japanese people, I mean, we've seen unfortunate tragic events recently in Japan. And at the same time, we've seen how even with the facing shortage of food, the queues go for miles, and they're single line queues, waiting in patience. So the patience that we see as evidence in Japanese people, that's the kind of qualities that we should really look to build in ourselves. And then the principles of Islamic finance will come through.
Okay. All right, we'll just have to stop it there. Yeah, Yasab, just very briefly, I mean, what would be your message to youngsters watching this program?
Well, as members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, our challenge is to transform materialism into spiritualism. That is what we have to work for. And we should look ahead for transforming all these current systems, including the economic system and financial system, in accordance with the values of the Islamic systems, so that humanity can really derive the benefit of all the favors and the bounties of Allah that He has created for the well-being of humanity.
Okay, Jazakallah Waseem Saab, just finally.
I would say just one word. What ails the global society is not the presence or absence of interest rate. It's an absence of justice.
Okay. So justice is the key in all of this.
Justice is the key. It's economic justice, it's social justice, legal justice. As long as the justice does not come to the society, we'll continue to have the issues and problems that we do have.
Okay, all right, Jazakallah, I want to thank my esteemed panel for your scholarly input to the discussion. And I know there were a lot of you wanting to add in more points of view, but unfortunately we've come to the end of the time. Don't forget to the viewers at home as well, you can put in your points of view. Our email address is realtalk@mta.tv. You can go on our official website, www.mta.tv/realtalk. And also you can follow us on Twitter at @MTA_realtalk, where you can find out the next points of view and next topics that we'll be discussing in future programs. With programs like this, obviously we're not going to change the whole economic system in just 1 hour, but I want you at home to start thinking about topics like this. And the next time you're out there and you see an advert for a new car or a new gadget, just think, you know, do you really need this? And if I buy this, where will my money go to? And maybe what are the better uses of my money as well? So as youngsters, as Muslims, we have a huge obligation to think about our money and invest it wisely. So that, I think, is, you know, a good point to leave the discussion. I hope you can join us next time for more Real Talk, but until then, Assalamu alaikum.